My mother-in-law constantly calls me a freeloader, living off her son. She openly looks down on me, from the food I eat to the money I earn. My husband always takes his mother's side, while I can only endure in silence to keep the peace at home. But they forget one thing. Someone who has been belittled for too long will eventually rise up. And when I finally take action, there will be no way back for them. I still remember very clearly the day my mother-in-law, Eleanor, officially moved in with us. At the time, I was in the middle months of my pregnancy, exhausted both physically and mentally, yet my husband, Mark, walked into the room with an excited look on his face as if he were about to share some wonderful news. He came quickly to the bed, leaned down to kiss my forehead, then spoke in a light but firm voice. "Honey, Mom has agreed to move in and help us. It's going to be great having her here to take care of you when you give birth, right?" I froze, taking a few seconds to react. It felt like someone had just scratched the inside of my ear. "You didn't even talk to me about this. We need our own space. Our house isn't big enough for 3 adults to live together without issues." Mark frowned, the joy in his eyes fading instantly. He sat up straight, crossed his arms, and his voice turned sharp. "Don't be so selfish. She's all alone. She gave up her friends and her familiar home just to come here and help you. You should be grateful." I looked at him, my throat tightening. Grateful? For being forced to live with someone without even being asked? But I didn't say anything more. Maybe I was too tired to argue, or maybe I didn't want to look petty in his eyes at that moment. And so, Eleanor moved in. That evening, I cooked a simple dinner. Lemon-marinated roasted chicken, grilled vegetables, and a bit of mashed potatoes. All of them were Mark's favorites. I remembered how he used to keep reaching for more whenever he had this meal. So today, I deliberately chose that exact menu, a small effort to hold on to a bit of warmth in the increasingly tense atmosphere of this house. I set the table carefully, placing each plate in its proper spot, then put Eleanor's plate down last with a polite smile. She glanced at the plate, but instead of saying thank you or simply starting the meal, she picked up her knife and fork as if she were examining the food under a microscope. After a moment, she curled her lips. "You made this?" Mark has only ever been used to my cooking since he was little. He has very particular tastes. I froze while pouring the water. My back stiffened. She had spoken as if I were a trainee chef who had ruined dinner for a regular guest. And more importantly, she spoke with the tone of someone defending her territory, as if Mark were the only possession she had left. I glanced at Mark. He was still focused on cutting his meat, saying nothing. I waited for a reaction, a word to ease the awkwardness hanging in the air. But Eleanor didn't give anyone the chance to speak. She turned to Mark, her voice so gentle it gave me chills. "Sweetheart, let me cook for you tomorrow. You've lost a few pounds lately." Mark scratched his head and gave a sheepish smile. His voice was so soft I had to strain to hear it. "Thanks, Mom, but Emily's cooking is good too." I swallowed hard. I didn't know whether I felt worse because his words were so weak, or because he said them as if he were apologizing to his mother, instead of defending me. I thought that was the end of it. But Eleanor continued, as if she had prepared an entire script for dinner. "I'm sure the girl tried. But roasting chicken like this makes it a bit dry. Mark likes it tender and juicy. Back then, when I made it, he finished every bite. And the vegetables? Maybe not enough salt. It's fine though. Better than nothing." I looked at her, trying to keep a calm expression. But under the table, my hand clenched the napkin so tightly it nearly tore. Mark nodded in agreement. He shrugged, like he was trying to keep the peace on both sides. "Well, Mom's honey glazed chicken is really good. I turned to look at him. I asked a simple question, no raised voice, no accusation. You really think this chicken is dry? Mark glanced at Eleanor, then looked at me. He pressed his lips together for a second, then scratched his head again. No, not really. It's just that Mom has more experience. But yours is okay too. Okay. I heard that word like it was meant to comfort a child who had failed a test. No one asked me to make a perfect meal. But I made it with care. And what I received in return was a string of soft criticisms that cut deep, hidden between shrugs and awkward smiles from the two of them. That dinner didn't end with an argument, but I couldn't swallow another bite. The bitterness in my throat wasn't from the roasted chicken. It was the feeling of being pushed out of my own kitchen. And the husband I once trusted was the first to pull his hand away when I needed it held the most. It was just one dinner, but it was a very clear sign that I wasn't accepted, and worse, I wasn't protected. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I made myself a cup of ginger tea and sat in silence, breathing steadily to keep my mind clear. At 10 o'clock, I had an important call with a major client, someone I had spent nearly 2 months carefully following up with to convince into a partnership. It was my first chance to prove that I could still work effectively, even while pregnant. And I needed it, not just for my job, but for my self-respect. Because ever since Eleanor moved into this house, I had started to feel like an extra. I sat at my desk early, going over each slide of the presentation. The lighting was adjusted, the virtual background was ready, the camera and mic were set to their optimal settings. I took a deep breath and clicked the button to start the call. The Zoom screen lit up with the face of the client on the other side. I smiled confidently, introduced myself, began the conversation. Everything flowed smoothly. Words, numbers, charts followed one another like they had been rehearsed dozens of times. I was in a state of deep focus, fully aware that I was in control. Until a loud knock came at the door. I turned slightly, frowning, and gestured toward the door with a quick wave as if signaling a delivery person to wait a moment. But the door didn't stop at being knocked. It burst open. Eleanor appeared like a gust of wind right in the middle of my presentation. In her hand was a glass jar, and her face was twisted as if she were enduring something truly urgent. Can you help me open this jar? I need it right now. Her voice was loud, clear, and firm. Loud enough that every word was audible to the client on the other end. I froze for a second, then forced a tight smile, apologizing with my eyes, quickly turning off the camera while the client was still mid-sentence. My hand trembled as I moved the mouse to find the mute button. I stood up quickly and walked over to her. Mom, I'm in a very important meeting. Can I help you a little later? I tried to keep my voice gentle, but Eleanor didn't let it go. She squinted at me as if I had just refused to open the gates of heaven for her. Her voice wasn't loud or sharp, but every word dropped like it had thorns digging into my skin. Oh, I thought your job was just some little drawing hobby, nothing that important. I snatched the jar, gripped the lid tightly, opened it, and placed it back in her hand. I didn't say another word. No expression. But inside me, something felt pierced. There was no blood, but it was enough to feel the sting of being looked down on. I returned to my desk, turned the camera back on, and tried to act like nothing had happened. But I knew the look in the client's eyes had changed. Just a few minutes later, the call ended in haste. I apologized for a supposed connection issue. The client said they would reconsider the partnership schedule. Their voice wasn't annoyed, but the enthusiasm from earlier was gone. I shut the laptop and stared at the dark screen reflecting my own face. I knew what they were thinking. I knew what that sympathetic look meant. I knew that in the professional world, a moment like that was enough to crack someone's trust. And I also knew Eleanor didn't do it by accident. She knew I was in a meeting. She knew exactly what kind of work I did, but she still walked in, still spoke loudly, still mocked me. Because in her eyes, I was never worthy. And maybe, deep down, someone like me being successful was the one thing she could never accept. At lunchtime that day, I didn't come down to eat. I lay still on the bed, one hand resting on my belly, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The room was strangely quiet, but inside me, everything felt like a mess of broken pieces, full of exhaustion and disappointment. I tried to breathe evenly, holding on to whatever clarity I could manage. I thought if I stayed silent long enough, everything would pass. But then, from downstairs, I heard Mark's voice clearly. "The house looks so clean today." I closed my eyes, the corners of my lips lifting slightly. Maybe he had noticed. Maybe he understood I had spent the whole morning cleaning, even though my body ached and my belly was constantly tense. But right after that, another voice cut in, sharp, cold, and so familiar it made it hard to breathe. "Of course it is. I've been cleaning all morning, while some people slept until noon." I didn't have to open my eyes to picture Eleanor's face, smug and smirking, glancing up the stairs to make sure I could hear her. She spoke as if I were some freeloader lying around all day, and she was the one carrying this household. She didn't stop there. Her voice grew louder, this time with no attempt to lower it. "What kind of woman doesn't even come downstairs at this hour? I wonder if she even knows how to be a mother. Just a few months pregnant and already acting weak. How is she going to give birth in a few more?" When I was pregnant, I still worked in the fields, still cooked for my entire in-law family. There was no such thing as lying around like some princess. Then I heard Mark's voice. He let out a soft laugh, one I couldn't tell was disagreement or agreement. He said something quietly, but I couldn't make out the words. Then he called out to me, his voice filled with a kind of distant concern. "Hey, have you eaten yet? Mom made that salad you like." I didn't answer, not because I was angry, but because my throat tightened. A few minutes later, I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. The door opened gently. Mark stepped in, walked to the bed, and sat down at the edge. His hand softly stroked my hair. He didn't ask if I was okay. He only said one sentence, like he was trying to explain for his mother once again. "She's getting old. Don't take it to heart. She didn't mean anything by it." I opened my eyes and looked straight into his. I didn't say anything. But in my head, every word was crystal clear. He always says she didn't mean it, but not once has he asked me how I feel. In that sentence, I am always the one who has to stay quiet. And his mother is always allowed to say whatever she wants, even if it cuts someone deeply. And no one means anything by it. But that, day by day, is corroding my self-respect and patience, like acid dripping slowly onto a wound that hasn't healed. Mark doesn't see it, and I have started not wanting to close my eyes and let it go anymore. I turned my face to the wall. Mark said nothing else, then quietly went back downstairs, and I lay still, feeling like I had just been pressed into a corner inside my own home. No shouting, no violence, but every word Eleanor said, every time Mark stayed silent, felt like a needle, small, but sharp, and each day, another prick. I never locked the door to my home office, partly because I trusted, and partly because I believed that in this house, at the very least, I still had a private space no one would intrude upon. But that day, when I returned from the clinic, my belly heavy and my head spinning from lack of sleep, I had just stepped into the hallway when I saw the door to my office slightly open. The blue glow from the laptop screen spilled out into the corridor. I froze for a few seconds. Not because I feared a break-in, but because the only person who could possibly be in there was Eleanor. I pushed the door open and saw her sitting in my chair, hand on my mouse, moving it across my computer screen with a kind of ease that sent chills down my spine. I spoke, my throat dry. "Mom, what are you doing with my computer?" Eleanor didn't turn around. Her eyes stayed on the screen. Her voice came out calm and composed. "My tablet ran out of battery. I needed to look something up. Is there a problem?" I rushed over and looked at the screen. Empty. I opened the main folder. Empty. I bent down, heart pounding. My hand trembled as I hovered the cursor over the folder that held the project I'd been working on for 6 weeks. Nothing. I looked at her. My voice began to rise, even though I was trying to stay calm. "Where are my files? What did you do to them?" Eleanor narrowed her eyes at me, tilting her head slightly, as if carefully deciding how to word her response in the gentlest way possible. "I saw those useless files and deleted them to free up space. No need to make a fuss over something so trivial." I was stunned. My whole body felt drained. I didn't know how to describe the feeling except as horror. She called 6 weeks of my work useless. She went into my room without asking. She deleted everything like it was nothing more than scrap paper. I don't remember how I left the room. I only remember that when I saw Mark in the living room, I could barely catch my breath. "Mark. Mom deleted my entire month-long project. I'm about to lose a client." I spoke through tears. I waited for him to hug me, to ask what his mother was thinking, or at least to ask if I was okay. But he didn't. He sighed. That same familiar sigh he always gave whenever I brought up his mother. "Emily. Mom probably didn't know it was something important. She didn't mean it. Why didn't you back up your files? You're partly at fault too." I looked at him. I couldn't believe my ears. Every word he said felt like cold water splashing across my face. There was not a single word of blame toward Eleanor. Not a trace of anger. The only thing he did was point a finger at me. I sat down, hands resting on my belly, feeling like I had just lost something greater than work. I had lost even the basic respect of my own husband. In that moment, I understood clearly. In this house, I had no voice. And what was even more frightening was that the man I once loved didn't see anything wrong with that. He had chosen a side, and clearly, it wasn't mine. That afternoon, I was in the laundry room, pulling shirts from the basket and sorting them. There are small, repetitive tasks we do each week, but it's often in those moments that we notice something unexpected. I picked up the dark gray blazer Mark usually wore to work. As I lifted it to check the care label, my hand brushed against something in the chest pocket. I stopped, reached in. A piece of paper, folded in quarters. Nothing unusual. Mark often stuffed receipts into his pockets, but for some reason, that day, something in me felt uneasy. I unfolded the paper. My eyes landed on the number printed clearly in the top right corner. $15,000. A car repair invoice. The customer's name was Mark. The car model matched his. Everything matched. I stood frozen. 15,000? That couldn't be. He had told me it was only 8,000 and that it was from a bad investment. I still remembered the helpless look on his face, the long sigh when I asked about the missing money in our account. I took out my phone, took a picture of the invoice, then carefully folded it again and placed it back into the pocket just as it was. I said nothing. No anger. No shouting. I just quietly put everything away. But in my mind, I had already begun to form a plan. That evening, the three of us sat down to eat. Eleanor told the story of how Mark broke his arm falling off a bicycle when he was little, her voice filled with pride as if it were some kind of accomplishment. "My son is so brave. He broke his arm and didn't cry at all." Mark nodded along with the story. He smiled, added more vegetables to her plate, as if everything at this dinner was perfectly fine. As for me, I stayed silent. I didn't say a word, but I wasn't at peace. When the meal ended, I got up, walked to the bedroom, then came back with a piece of paper in my hand. I gently placed it on the table, right in front of Mark. "Mark, can you explain to me what this means? What is this $15,000 about? You told me you lost $8,000 in a failed investment. Not that you spent nearly double that amount fixing the car?" Mark looked at the paper as if he had just seen a ghost. His face went pale. His hand trembled slightly. "Babe, don't get the wrong idea. Well, the car was more damaged than I thought. They added some extra charges. You know how expensive these dealerships are." I looked at him. I looked for a long time. My voice was no longer calm. It had turned cold, sharp like a blade. $7,000 in extra charges, Mark. Do you think I'm that stupid? You lied to me. He opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything more. And I knew I had just seen the true face of the man I once trusted completely. And I also knew this wouldn't be the last time I would have to confront him. But this time, I would not stay silent anymore. I was still staring at Mark when the sound of Eleanor's slippers came from the kitchen. She stepped out, holding a dish towel in one hand, walking slowly and confidently, as if she had just exited a play where she was the main character. She looked at me, then glanced at the piece of paper on the table, her lips curling into a smile that didn't bother to hide its mockery. "What is this drama now? Mark, my son, what's going on? What is she making you suffer for this time?" I turned to her, not hiding the frustration in my eyes. I took a deep breath to stay calm, then looked straight into hers. "I'm not making anyone suffer. I'm just asking my husband why he lied to me about this $15,000. Eleanor let out a sharp laugh, crossing her arms. She shook her head with a pitying expression, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over a lost piece of candy. "Oh, please." And here I thought it was something serious. That money, Mark gave it to me to help pay off my debts. He's a good son, a caring one. You're just jealous that he cares more about his mother than he does about you. Mark turned to her, his voice low, almost pleading. "Mom, please stop." I looked back at Mark. My heart ached so much I couldn't tell whether I was angry, sad, or just completely crushed. I clenched the hand resting on the table, then asked the one question I never thought I would have to ask the man I shared a bed with. You gave our money to your mother, and you lied to me. How can you speak to me like that?" Eleanor didn't let Mark answer. She leaned toward me, her voice triumphant, as if she had finally revealed my true self. "Speak to you. You should be grateful. If it weren't for that money, your husband's mother would have no place to live right now. Is that what you want? You're selfish and petty?" Mark lowered his head. He stared at the floor like he couldn't face my eyes. His voice was so quiet, I had to strain to hear it. "Emily, please calm down. I'm sorry. I didn't want to upset you. My mother needed help. We can earn that money back." I looked at him. Tears welled up in my eyes, but not because I was weak. It was because I could feel my heart breaking, piece by piece. "No, it's not about the money, Mark. It's about the fact that you lied. You chose to side with your mother and deceive your wife. You betrayed my trust. The air in the room turned suffocatingly silent. The only thing I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. But every word I spoke came from a place of being silenced, belittled, dismissed, and now it had to stop. I stood there, chest heaving, both hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My whole body was holding in every ounce of anger, disappointment, and humiliation, like pressure in a sealed chamber. And then, when there was nothing left to hold back, I lifted my head, looked straight at Mark, then turned to Eleanor. I can't live like this anymore. I want a divorce. No one responded right away. For a few seconds, the room was completely still. The ticking of the wall clock echoed louder than it should have. I saw Mark's face freeze, his eyes wide with panic, his mouth slightly open as if he wanted to speak but hadn't found the words. And then Eleanor laughed. She laughed loudly, the sound bursting through the tension like a firecracker, filled with mockery and disdain. Divorce! Did you hear that, Mark? She said divorce. How ridiculous. Who does she think she is? She has no money, a baby on the way, and no family here. Where will she go? What will she do? She doesn't have the courage for something like that. A few days from now, she'll come crawling back, apologizing and begging us to forgive this foolishness. Pathetic. I turned to Mark. I wasn't looking for agreement. I just needed a reaction. Any reaction that would show I mattered more to him than just being a dutiful son's wife. But Mark stepped back, as if caught between two women he didn't want to confront. Emily, don't say things like that. Mom is right. You're not thinking clearly. Let's talk about this later. I looked at him for a long time. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel hurt either. I just felt empty. So empty that no sound remained in my mind, except the wind slipping through the slightly open window. I didn't say anything, and there was nothing left to say. I looked at the two of them. There was no more anger in my eyes, only a coldness and distance that felt almost terrifying. I saw Eleanor freeze for a moment when she caught that expression. Her face still carried its usual arrogance, but I knew she could sense something was off. As for Mark, he just stood there, arms limp at his sides, lips pressed tight like a child who had done something wrong, but didn't have the courage to admit it. I turned around and slowly walked down the hallway. I didn't walk fast, nor was I trying to prove anything. I simply turned my back on them. I walked up the stairs, each step reaffirming the decision I had already made. I opened the door to my room, stepped inside, and gently closed it behind me. No door slamming, no shouting, just the quiet click of the lock turning, followed by a silence heavier than any scream. I sat down on the bed and placed my hand on my belly. Did they really think I had no way out? Did they really think I was that weak? Fine. Let them think so. But they were wrong. This time, I wasn't staying silent to endure. I was staying silent to prepare. And I wasn't preparing an apology. I was preparing for a battle. A battle I intended to finish. As a mother, as a woman, and as a human being with self-respect. That Saturday afternoon, the house was unusually quiet. I knew exactly why. They thought I had calmed down. They thought I was just being emotional. They thought I would come back and apologize, and everything would go back to how it always was. Mark and Eleanor were sitting in the living room. As I walked down the stairs, I saw them laughing and talking, eyes glued to the TV screen. They didn't notice me standing there, quietly observing every expression on their faces. Relaxed, at ease, carefree. as if everything I had gone through was just a side note. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't rush. I stepped forward and opened the door with a calmness I didn't even know I had. Standing in front of me was Lisa, my lawyer, dressed neatly, radiating confidence, a familiar black case in her hand. I quietly invited her in. The two of us walked into the living room. Mark and Eleanor both turned around, their eyes passing over Lisa before settling on me. Mark frowned, and Eleanor couldn't hide her displeasure. "Bringing home another guest, are we?" "Emily, this isn't a hotel. We're having family time." I smiled, but the smile was so cold that even I barely recognized myself. "She's not a guest, ma'am. This is my lawyer, Lisa. She's here to witness and handle a few matters." Mark jumped up from his seat. His face instantly went pale, as if he had just heard something earth-shattering. What the hell are you doing? A lawyer? For what?" Lisa stepped forward and pulled a business card from her handbag. Her voice was clear, polite, but firm. "Good afternoon, Mr. Mark, Mrs. Eleanor. I'm Lisa, representing my client, Ms. Emily. She has asked me to proceed with her divorce case and the related financial matters." Laughter erupted from Eleanor's mouth. She laughed loudly, her voice echoing through the room, full of scorn as if watching a bad comedy. "Divorce? I knew it. You brought a lawyer to scare us? Pathetic. Get out of my house right now." I didn't answer her. I simply opened the folder in my hand, took out a thick stack of documents, and placed it on the glass table in the center of the room. I opened it calmly, each page turned with steady hands, each piece of evidence laid out without the slightest hesitation. This is not a joke. And this is no longer your house. This is the truth, Mark. I looked straight at him, then pointed to each section in the file with my finger. This is proof that you lied to me, transferred our family's money to your mother without my consent. This is the recording, taken in a single-party consent state, of her verbal abuse, threats, and her admission to tampering with my personal property. And this, I placed the divorce petition on top, is my decision. I've already signed it. Mark stumbled back a step, his hands clenched, then released, then clenched again. His face turned red, eyes wide with panic. You recorded my mother? Are you insane? I'm not signing anything. Who do you think you are?" Eleanor rushed forward, her face flushed deep red. Her voice thundered through the room like a storm. "You have no right to do this! You crazy woman! You're destroying this family! Mark, throw that woman and her lawyer out of this house right now!" I turned to look at her. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. I simply looked her straight in the eyes so she could see clearly that from now on, I was the one in control of everything in this house. "No, ma'am. You are the one who destroyed it. You ruined your son's happiness. And now, you will leave my house. My lawyer has already prepared a formal notice of eviction. You have 30 days, but I suggest you leave sooner." Lisa stepped forward, holding the document in her hand. Her voice was clear and firm. "Based on this evidence, if this case goes to court, my client will not only gain full custody and retain ownership of this house, but may also pursue damages. I strongly advise your cooperation." Mark could no longer stand. He collapsed into the chair, buried his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook violently before he broke down crying like a child. "No, Emily, you can't do this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was wrong. It was all my fault. Please don't do this. Give me a chance to make it right." Eleanor turned to her son. Her face was no longer filled with rage, but with disappointment and a hint of disgust. "Stand up, son. Don't grovel in front of that woman. She's not worth it." I looked at Mark one last time. My voice was steady, Not bitter, not sorrowful. Just a sentence that brought everything to a close. A chance? You had 1,000 chances, Mark, and you always chose your mother. Now, I choose my daughter, and I choose to take back the respect I deserve. A few weeks after I moved out of that house, everything around me gradually became quiet. No more clattering of pots and pans when Eleanor accidentally dropped them. No more doors opening in the middle of my meetings. No more sweet-toned insults that burned like poison. I thought they would go back to their old life, just the two of them, with no one left to blame for the tension. But then one morning, the neighbor from the house across the street knocked on the door of the apartment I was renting, eyes wide with curiosity and excitement, like she was about to share something explosive. That morning, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. The woman's voice on the other end sounded very familiar. "Emily, is that you? This is Mrs. Ruth." I was a bit surprised, not sure why my ex-husband's neighbor was calling, but I quickly responded. "Yes, hello ma'am. Is something wrong?" Her voice lowered, as if she were about to share something important. "Sweetheart, you moved out just in time. That house has been like a boiling pot all week." I frowned, tilting my head slightly. "What happened, ma'am?" She lowered her voice again, as if afraid someone else might hear. I sat there in silence, my heart beating just a little harder. I didn't speak. I just listened to her continue. I thought something terrible had happened to one of them. But no, it went on like that for a whole week. Then, the morning before last, I saw Eleanor dragging a huge suitcase out the door. Her face was swollen, eyes red. I'm telling you, I've never seen her look so defeated. No one said goodbye. No one walked her out. She just quietly pulled the suitcase, got into a taxi. Later, I heard from a neighbor that she moved in with her sister. I blinked, but inside me, a strange feeling rose. Not satisfaction at Eleanor's pain, but a sense that justice had been served. Because after everything she did, I never screamed. I never crossed the line. Yet it was my silent departure that struck the hardest blow, the one she couldn't endure. For the first time in her life, she was pushed out by her own son, rejected, left behind, punished not by me, but by the very person she always believed would stand by her forever. 5 months after I signed the divorce papers, my life is completely different. I now live in a small apartment, but it is full of light and air. Every morning when I wake up, I hear Chloe's giggles echoing through the sunlit room. No more raised voices, no one barging into my room, no more judging eyes, only me and my daughter, complete and at peace. I lift Chloe into my arms and carry her out to the balcony. A light breeze runs through my hair, carrying the scent of greenery after last night's rain. I lower my head to look at her, touch my nose gently to her forehead, and listen to that pure laughter ring out like silver bells from deep within my chest. Sometimes, family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you build with your own hands. And I have rebuilt mine, for myself and for my daughter. That afternoon, Mark came. He had called beforehand. I agreed to let him see Chloe, and when I opened the door, I saw a completely different man. No suit, no confident posture, no cold, commanding tone. In front of me stood a Mark in a plain t-shirt, dark pants, his hands awkwardly resting at his sides. His eyes were cast downward, as if he was afraid I might see his past reflected in my gaze. He stepped inside and sat on the chair across from me. He said nothing, only watched silently as Chloe played with her stuffed bear. After a moment, he lowered his head and spoke, his voice soft and filled with guilt. "Thank you for letting me see Chloe. She's beautiful, and she looks so much like you. She looks truly happy." I nodded. My voice was calm, without a trace of emotion. "Yes, she needs a peaceful environment to grow up, and now she has that." Mark looked up, his eyes drifting into the air for a while, then he bowed his head again, his voice tight. "I know. I just spoke with Aunt Sarah. My mother, she's not doing well." He let out a long breath, as if preparing to say something he had been holding in for a long time. "She's been constantly causing problems at Aunt Sarah's house, yelling, ordering everyone around, demanding meals made exactly the way she wants, even trying to dictate how Aunt Sarah should manage her finances. Aunt Sarah called me to complain. She said, 'I can't take her anymore. She's worse than a 3-year-old. I gave a slight smile, one that was gentle but carried meaning. "Oh, really? I can imagine, but that's their business. Aunt Sarah can handle it herself." Mark nodded. He looked at me a bit longer, then slowly spoke again, his voice tired like someone waking from a long daze. "She told me, 'Go thank your ex-wife.' She did something I never had the courage to do. She taught that woman a lesson she truly deserved. Your mother now is like a puppet with its strings cut, struggling helplessly." I said nothing. I simply leaned down, picked up Chloe, and held her in my arms. She wrapped her arms around my neck, nuzzling her cheek against my shoulder, as if she understood her mother had just come through a heavy conversation. I stayed seated, gently running my fingers through Chloe's soft hair as she rested her head on my shoulder, giggling now and then when my hand tickled her neck. The late afternoon light streamed in through the window, casting a golden hue over the room. Mark sat across from us, quiet and contemplative. He remained that way for almost an hour, speaking only occasionally to Chloe in a hushed voice. All the confidence, indifference, and arrogance he once had were completely gone. Then Mark looked up, his eyes heavy, as if he were about to reveal one final secret. "And there's one more thing. Aunt Sarah just told me. About my mother and my father." I looked at him, said nothing, just waited for him to go on. I didn't know about this before. My mother divorced my father many years ago. Quietly, because he couldn't take her personality anymore. Aunt Sarah said she was there when he packed his things and left, and my mother just stood there cursing, not stopping him, not sad, not trying to keep him. I froze for a second. Everything I had ever sensed about Eleanor's controlling nature suddenly connected, clearer and more complete than ever. Mark continued, his voice growing softer but steady. "And now, when she's broke, alone, depending on Aunt Sarah, my father has found happiness again, with a gentle piano teacher. They met at a dance club for seniors. He looks so much younger now. They even sent a wedding invitation to my mother." I frowned. "A wedding invitation? To Eleanor?" Mark nodded slowly. "Yes, but not really to invite her. Aunt Sarah said it was more like a mocking gesture, like saying, 'Look, he's starting a new life, without her, without needing her.'" I went quiet for a few seconds, then let out a soft laugh. Not loud, not bitter, just a quiet, satisfied laugh. "Really?" He finally found peace. "I'm genuinely happy for him." Mark nodded, his gaze distant. He looked like someone waking from a long and chaotic dream. "My mother, she tore the invitation to pieces. She cried all day. Not out of heartbreak, but out of rage and humiliation. Aunt Sarah said she was like someone going mad. The way she screamed, like she couldn't believe there would ever be a day she'd be left behind." I said nothing more. I looked at my daughter, then leaned down and kissed her on the forehead. Mark stood up, walked over, gave Chloe a quick hug, then turned away. He looked worn out, his shoulders slumped, not like a man leaving his ex-wife's home, but like someone walking out of his own life. The door closed behind him. I was still holding Chloe as I stepped out onto the balcony. A cool breeze passed through my hair, carrying with it the scent of a new day. Below, flowers had begun to bloom, bright and unbothered, as if they had never been trampled. Eleanor is now living in the hell she created for herself. No home, no son by her side, no power left to control anyone. Cut off by her ex-husband, shunned by her own family, and sent off with a wedding invitation laced with mockery. She once believed she was the center of everything, and now that world continues to turn perfectly without her. I held Chloe a little closer, my eyes fixed on the sunlit yard. It is the ending she deserved. As for me, I have everything. Not in wealth, but in peace. And the freedom to raise my daughter in a life not ruled by bitterness. A happy ending, in the sweetest, most fulfilling way I ever dared to dream. Sometimes, life doesn't take revenge with knives or cruel words. It does so with silence. With the way we continue to live well, to live peacefully, to live happily, while those who once belittled us are left to sit with the consequences of their own actions. I was once the daughter-in-law they called a freeloader, dismissed by my husband, controlled by a mother-in-law who tried to dominate both my spirit and my life. But today, I hold my daughter in my arms and know for certain that I stood up at the right time, and I have never once regretted letting go of someone who did not deserve to be held onto. If you have ever felt cornered, disrespected, or pushed to your limit, I want to tell you this. You can choose your ending. You have the right to live for yourself, and the peace you deserve will come. But only if you are brave enough to walk away. If any part of this story spoke to you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Revenge Diary to hear more powerful and inspiring stories. Every woman deserves the ending she hopes for, and sometimes that ending begins with a single moment of saying no.